Let's make this top for my new clothing brand, Polly New York, part 17. So I've finished preparing all of my stripes by adding interfacing and then folding the edges under a 1/4 inch. So now it's time to cut out the base pieces with my white fabric. So let's just get into it. So I finished cutting out all of my base pieces. So now what I need to do is cut out my interfacing for these pieces. So I'm basically going to use the same pattern pieces and then just subtract the seam allowance on each edge. And then I'll fuse the interfacing on. And then I can do the darts and sew them together. Okay, so I finished adding all of my fusible interfacing on all of the base pieces. So now it's time to do the darts, which is going to be difficult because basically the darts I made are like a very weird shape. So it's not your typical like regular triangle where I can just mark it with notches. I'm going to have to mark out the entire dart to sew it. And I did this so that the darts will be hidden behind stripes because I don't want any visible seams. And when I was making my samples with my muslin, I used like chalk or colored pencil, but since the fabric's white, I can't really do that. So my solution is I'm going to do a basting stitch just slightly inside of where the dart is, then sew it and then remove the basting stitch, and I think that that's going to be the best option. That's also why I cut this out so I can use this as a guide to sew it on. So I'm really hoping that this works. Okay, so I finished sewing all my darts, and using the basting stitch to mark it out actually worked really well. So I'm going to press the darts either towards the center front or the center back, depending if it's the front or back piece. I also sewed the top and the bottom cup base pieces together, and then I'll press the seam open. So now what I'm going to do is I have my little side stripes. So whenever I sew my side seam to connect the back and the front piece, I basically want to also at the same time sew these, because on my last sample I did, I sewed the stripes on and then sewed the side seam, and so you can see it didn't line up quite right, so it looks bad. So I figure I'll just do it all in one. But first I am going to sew these on at like a 1/4 inch, and then I'll sew the side seam at a 1/2 inch. That way you won't be able to see that 1/4 inch stitch. I just want to make sure that it's in place and secured, then sew them together. Okay, so I finished sewing together the front piece with the 2 back pieces. So my next step is to sew all of the rest of the stripes onto here. Then we can work on the cups and figuring out how I'm going to add the padding in. So go to part 18 and I'll start sewing on all my stripes.